President Trump made one of the biggest decisions of his presidency when he ordered a drone strike that took out terrorist Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. But the reaction to killing the world's #1 terrorist turned when Donald Trump turned on the TV and could not believe who he saw just betray America. The American media loudly declared itself an ally of the Iranian government after President Trump's bold order that resulted in the successful targeting of a terrorist mastermind that murdered over 600 American soldiers. So-called journalists joined Democrats like Nancy Pelosi in mourning Soleimani's death. MSNBC's Chris Matthews declared Soleimani's death on the level with those of Princess Diana or Elvis Presley.
Let me ask you about what we should have done. I go back to the congressman on this. You know, when some people die, you don't know what the impact's going to be. When Princess Diana died, for example, there was a huge emotional outpouring. Elvis Presley in our culture. It turns out that this general we killed was a beloved hero of the Iranian people, to the point where, look at the people we got pictures of now, these enormous crowds coming out. There's no American emotion in this case, but there's a hell of a lot of emotion on the other side.
In an even worse display, CNN's Erin Burnett acted as spokeswoman for the Iranian government by claiming Iranians that shouted death to America didn't really mean it.
Throughout the Middle East.
I will say, I was in Tehran when they were chanting "Death to America" once. I was at a rally. The people couldn't have been more friendly to me personally as an American. It sort of felt like a thing and a trope as opposed to anything that actually was seriously meant and considered.
Well,
I understand your point,
Erin,
but having been there, my experience was quite
Erin,
different.
your entire life.
So-called mainstream media reporters took heart by government-mandated demonstrations to mourn Soleimani's death as evidence that Soleimani was a beloved figure in Iran and that Trump was reckless in taking him out. That was more fake news from so-called journalists acting as Iranian influence agents. This was after the Iranian government admitted it shot down an airliner, killing 176 innocents the night they fired ballistic missiles at 2 U.S. Air Force bases. In contrast to the so-called mainstream media's portrayal of Iranians united behind their government in opposition to Donald Trump, anti-government protests erupted in the streets of Tehran where demonstrators shouted that Soleimani was a monster and that Iran's supreme leader was a traitor. Protesters also refused to walk on paintings of the American and Israeli flags in a sign of defiance against the Iranian regime. In a time of international crisis, the American people could not count on their own media to keep them properly informed of events. That's because so-called mainstream media reporters hate Donald Trump with so much passion that they were willing to act as disinformation agents for the Iranian government. If you are sick and tired of all the fake news from the so-called mainstream media and want real news that you can trust, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel.